So if by grace, this is what it says, then it cannot be based on works. If it were, grace would no longer be grace. We talked about how it's not grace unless it needs to be grace. Just like when somebody makes you so upset and you have to get beyond that, that's why it's called grace. Otherwise, it's not. As simple as that. So the answer there, if salvation is by grace, is no longer based on works, otherwise grace would no longer be grace. All right? If salvation is by grace, for those that don't have it, it is no longer based on works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace. Then we read Psalm 89, verse 30 through 32. And I'll just skip along because verse 33 says, God won't take his love from them, nor allow his faithfulness to fail. God won't take his love from them, nor allow his faithfulness to fail. Y'all already have that? Yes, raise your hand if you don't. Everybody? You don't? Okay. God will not take his love from them, nor allow his faithfulness to fail. For those that are joining online, this is where we are. God won't take his love from them, nor allow his faithfulness to fail. And then we talked about the three proofs. We talked about Israel always has a believing remnant. Israel's rejection of the gospel is temporary. Now that's really one that you got to wrap your minds around. God's people and their rejection of the gospel is temporary. What do y'all remember we talked about that? Anybody? It was more than just the answers on the page. So what did we talk about? Okay. We'll see if we can get there. Y'all remember. We might need to read the text since y'all didn't remember. In Romans 11 through 24, it says, again, I ask, did they stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? Not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. Did that jump off the page to anybody just when you hear that? Listen to what it says. Because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. Yeah. What does it say, you Reverend? Tell me.
Israel probably thinks they should be the only ones that receive salvation.
Yeah.
But in fact, God saved the Gentiles.
Right.
And so Israel's like, hey, what's up with that?
So what did y'all, when y'all heard that, what is that? I mean, because of their transgression, the Israelites, they temporarily disobeyed. Church folk wasn't acting like church folk. So God said, I'm gonna go out here and save the world. And hopefully the church will become envious and say, I want what they have. I mean, that's kind of the gist behind this particular passage. But if their transgression means riches for the world, it's in the text, and their loss means riches for the Gentile, how much greater riches will their full inclusion bring? In other words, if you are the chosen people, because we like to quote that, we're a peculiar people, we're a royal priesthood, we're chosen people. Yeah. But if we're rejecting the word, God said, I'll take your blessings and go ahead and put it over here. The good news is we serve a God that has unlimited resources. That's really the good news. But we can't expect God to keep on blessing us if we continue to violate the commandments. Because That's what's implied in this text. It says, yes, there's a blessing for you, Israel, but I'm going to give salvation to the Gentiles. I think we, much like the Israelites, this is as old as you see as the Bible is. I think what happens is we believe because we are the chosen ones, we're the ones that saved, we're the ones that's in the church, then God's going to bless us. But as we saw in this illustration, Deacon Thorpe, we're experiencing a technical difficulty. Deacon Thorpe is a techie, if y'all don't know. He understands this technology. So what I was sharing with them, Deacon Thorpe, is this. Yes, it's connected properly. We have the right equipment in place. All the right connections. You can double check for yourself. I had 2 or 3 people come and look for themselves just to make sure the pastor wasn't having a lapse of memory. They came to double check to make sure your boy was doing what he knows what to do. But what I told him is, it's not what you can see that's the problem. It's what you can't see. And much the same, our relationship with the Lord is not about what many of us see. We show up at church, we look good, we got the right connection. We in the choir, we a trustee, we a deacon, we a deaconess, we a minister. But guess what? None of that matters if your relationship with the Lord is not intact. Because you can try all you want and all you're going to get is nothing. Because this will reveal your true connection. Oh yeah, it's plugged in. It's in the church. Oh yeah, it got the right title. Seed goes in the seed. Oh, it's done right now. But this is what people can't see about us. Who are you when nobody's looking? Who are you when you're not standing before people? If we strip away your title, who are you? This text is pretty powerful. I'm talking to you, Gentiles. And as much as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, Paul's talking here, I take pride in my ministry, in the hope that I may somehow arouse my own people to envy and save some of them. Paul says, look, I'm one of you. I'm talking to you in hopes that what I say to you will fall on good ears over here. So Bible study, I'm telling you, because you're in Bible study. You online, but I'm really hoping that this same seed will fall on some ground that's not represented in this room. That's not online. That's what Paul's saying. Because I can keep saying the same thing to the same people. Paul's talking to the church. Paul, if you know about Paul was often talking to the church folk. But he's saying, I'm talking to you in hopes that my people, the folk who are in the church every Sunday, the folks who are supposed to know the gospel, I'm hoping that if by talking to you, that they get it too. For if their rejection brought reconciliation to the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? In other words, if they just get it right, they don't even know the blessings that are in store for them. It's in the text. If the part of the dough offered as first fruit is holy, then the whole batch is holy. If the root is holy, so are its branches. In other words, I don't mean to sound like I'm insulting your intelligence, but it's saying here, if just a little bit is holy, then the whole batch is holy. If the first part, and then when he was talking about the first part of this particular text, the first fruit, he was talking about if any of you are holy, we're holy. If your leadership is holy, then its branches are holy. We say it in lay terms that wherever the head goes, there goes the body. If some of the branches have been broken off, my, that's a challenge. And you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not consider yourself superior to those other branches. Y'all remember what we talked about, how God engrafts in the other branches, though they're not part of us. God will bring in folk that don't look like you, folk who don't believe what you believe. Folks, I was at the pastors conference on Monday. I've been going to the pastors and ministers conference of Philadelphia and vicinity every week, and I was at the pastors conference on Monday, and there was a young lady dressed in Muslim garb, and I came in with my hat on, and for whatever reason, it caught her attention, and she kind of picked up on the fact that it was a Jewish hat because it was a wide brim. Not a Jewish hat, but still, that's what she thought. But nonetheless, Muslim garb, pastors and ministers conference of Philadelphia and vicinity. She's there. I don't know why, but it ain't mine to question. She's there. After service, she said, "Can you come and speak at our temple?" Oh, let me get your call. Couldn't get it out fast enough. Yeah, here. Say here. Call. I sure will. Because I understand how there are those folk who God will graft into, and you don't know what part you have in it. But if we're so off-putting, we got to be careful. We're so off-putting, that might be somebody that needed a word. And we all are getting nourished by the same sap. The challenge is, look what the Holy Ghost just told me. You got too many folks that just sap suckers, ain't doing nothing.
Oh my God.
But just getting the nourishment and ain't putting anything back in. You got to be able to not just be nourished from the Lord, but God is calling us to be disciples. Ours is to pour back into people. All right. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root, but the root supports you. You say then branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief. And you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but tremble. Do not be arrogant, but fear. Do not be arrogant, but reverence the Lord. That's what this text is saying. None of us can think so highly of ourselves that we think that because we made it. Because we could easily be the ones that are broken off. Easily. But if God did not spare the natural branches, the natural, that's all, that's the believer. He will not spare you either. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God. Kindness and sternness. Sternness to those who fail, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. That's grace right there. That's grace right there. If you don't persist in unbelief, all you have to do is start believing. And God says, I'll graft them in again. After all, if you were cut out of an olive tree that is wild by nature, anybody wild by? Okay, don't answer that. And contrary to the nature, were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? It's a good text. Then Zechariah 12, Verse 10, and I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one who mourns for an only child, and grieves bitterly for him as one who grieves for a firstborn son. And God says to them in this particular text, they mourn for him. This is what you want to write there. They mourn for him as for an only child. They mourn for him as for an only child. We on page, let's see. 78. Yeah, bottom of page 78. They mourn for him as for an only child, and bitterly grieve as for a firstborn son who has died. I'll say it again. They mourn for him as for an only child, and bitterly grieve as for a firstborn son who has died. All right? Now, as we continue on, we said we need to remember what truth in Proverbs 11, verse 2. Just for sake of memory, I'll remind you, it says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. Pride leads us to disgrace, but humility leads us to wisdom. Let me talk about this one for just a second. I may have said this, but I'm gonna talk about it. I always use the example of the devil's advocate. I've shared that with y'all before. But one of the things I want to say, because even when I think about that movie and this particular clip in that movie, what I will tell you is this is probably one of the toughest things to get over. Let me ask you, who graduated from high school? All right, good. All right, amen. You can be proud that you graduated from high school. Now, I'm not one that believes you should be so religious, so that you say, oh, I don't mean I'm proud that way. You know, don't be afraid to be proud that you did a thing. There are folks who have, despite odds against them, have accomplished great feats in this room. There are folk who, statistically speaking, should have been in another situation, but by the grace of God, they're here. There are folks who have, beyond what folks may have said about them, they have achieved greatness. And greatness is in whatever you believe greatness is. It's not greatness as the world says it is. And you can be proud of that. Pride is the one, though. It's a tricky something. You have to be careful that pride doesn't have you so that you think you're better than folk around you. That's when it starts to get real dangerous. Now, I'll be honest with you. I went to the best seminary in the country. And we are proud about that. Reverend Yvette and I went to the same seminary. In fact, we jokingly give other folk a hard time. Don't let them have gone to Virginia Union. Lord, that one right there. Don't let them talk about they went to Virginia Union. We call that the other school. And we all joke. Because truth be told, now that's if you were to hear us, you would think that it was serious. But truth be told, we really respect all of us. Because it takes something for some of us to go to seminary. It's more than a notion. It's more than a notion. If you meet somebody that's of color and they've gone to some formalized education, theologically speaking, it's a blessing. Because statistically, most of us don't. Now, If I began to treat somebody as though they are less than because they didn't, then that's when it's a problem. Because what happens is, y'all know the Bible good enough to know, God said he'll bring you down. Yeah. And even in front of you, God will take somebody that doesn't have an education at all and lift them right up in front of you.
All right.
And you wonder now how he got that such and such, and I'm doing this. Because it's the Lord's doing. And it's wonderful in our sight. Pride leads to disgrace and humility to wisdom. I was in Hawaii, and when I was pastoring there, I made this statement that I began to say very often. I said, Sister Renee, I used to tell people, don't make up answers to questions you don't know. One of the most profound things you can say, Sister Yvonne, is, I don't know. And I would teach around this. I would really teach around it because I believe, now here's the other piece. If you come as pastor, I say, look, I don't know. But tell you what, we can come to find out together. Let's go, and I'll come back to you next week. You come back to me, we'll figure out, what we know about this. So anyway, I would teach around this, and I told this particular brother, and as I was talking to the congregation, he said, and he kind of came at me sideways. He said, so what do you know? And I'm gonna tell y'all what happened in between. I'll just tell you he eventually he left because he felt like the pastor should have all the answers. No, seriously, I'm not even joking about that. He felt the pastor should have all the answers. But one of the things I've come to understand is this, and I hope y'all get this in your life. Maybe you already know it. It took me a while to get this. But what I realized, and I've said it publicly before y'all, what I realized is this: the more I know, Dr. Jones, help me out, the more I realize I need to know. It seemed like the more I began to understand God, the more I realized I don't understand God. I gave y'all an illustration, a golf illustration some months ago, and that's a great example for me. For those that wasn't here, I'll tell you real quick. I was with a friend. We were playing golf. He hit the ball. I thought the ball was much closer than it was. The closer I got, the further the ball seemed to be away from the hole. That's kind of the short of it. The point I make, though, is you can have a perspective based on improper data. And the more information you have, the more you understand what's really going on. And when you get to the point you don't realize, where you just set on your stuff, it'll lead to a disgrace. Imagine for a moment, let's go back to this. Imagine for a moment, take all this. Imagine this $300 I got in my pocket right here. These are what? Imagine you got to believe. Speak things as not as though they were. Y'all ain't hearing me. But imagine we're at that hole and we hit the ball, and I'm so set. I'll say, look, I got $300 on it. Because they do that on the golf course. Ask Deacon Ed, he done lost some money. and we get up to the hole, and I'm walking, I'm set. And I believe it. The more I believe, you know what? Not just 300, put another 200 on it. I get up to the hole, I done lost all my money. I'm disgraced. But I had enough. Now, I ain't lie to you. In my head, I was thinking he was wrong. Because I had on my Oakley sunglasses, my Nike ball cap, my Nike golf shoes. Ain't no way he was right and I was wrong. Because the first thing he said was, nah, it's not that close. I said, man, you're right about a hole. point I'm making is I had a perspective. I had a judgment. The judgment was based on the fact that I had better equipment than he had. He didn't have glasses on at all. So I could see better. So I thought. Can you imagine how if in our faith we operate the same way? I've been in the church longer than him. I done served at this church longer than them. I've been in part of this ministry longer than her. She can't tell me nothing. I done led this song for 5, 10, 16, 20 years. Imagine how easily it is for pride to sneak up on us. And it could be based on misinformation. And I'm telling you, this is one of those ones that's easy to creep upon you. And you won't even know it until you've fallen into this place of disgrace or this place of destruction. All right. Not sure. They're logging on?
We're walking around.
Oh.
It stems on.
Let's see.
Oh, did you? Oh, that's not, but you're.
Oh,
There's another one.
I got it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
You weren't giving it you before.
It's okay.
Okay.
I think it's Deacon Atkins. It's, but he's,
Yeah, he's not reading.
I don't know if he has audio on.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
We got a lot of complaints about people reading that.
Yeah.
Having conversations, sidebar and around.
Yeah. All right. So number 3 in our lesson, and this is really the good news, is Israel will be restored. This is the good news of the lesson. Israel will be restored. Paul doesn't want us to be ignorant of what's happening here to this mystery, that so we will not be conceited. Now, what's interesting, listen to the lesson. This is because Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come. Only God knows what the full number is, but we know it will be a very large number because of what we read in Revelation 7:9. I've been talking about, you've heard me talk about this. I was talking to, there was some ladies who came from the Girl Scouts today, and just the whole idea, I'm going somewhere with this, but I'm getting ready to meet with the Sunday school ministry on Sunday. And there's the question of, and some of you may have asked the same question, but there's the question of, what do we do? Or no, the question probably more so geared toward me most of the time. What are you gonna do to bring youth back into the church? Y'all heard that question, right? Well, if you have a biblical understanding, you know that sheep beget sheep. The under shepherd doesn't beget sheep. Now, I'm not saying that the pastor has no role. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, it's all of us. So when we began to wonder, what does it take to bring young people in? Really, what does it take to bring people in? Young people is a byproduct of people, right? Now there are some cases, not much in our community, but there are some cases where when young people come, they bring their parents. Not necessarily in our community, but it happens. It happens sometimes. But the point is, it takes all of us. This whole idea of discipling that you've been hearing me talk about for 2 years now, discipling is us being empowered, being taught to an understanding of what it takes to disciple another. Because then we bring somebody in, and that person brings someone in. So that's why the notion sheep beget sheep. Because as the pastor preaches and teaches, it ought to empower you to go out into your communities with your friends, your relatives, your acquaintances, your neighbors, and say, hey, look, won't you come and experience this word of God with me? So it's all of us. So it's not that I'm shunning any responsibility as pastor, because I do believe there is a part. But imagine for a moment that as the pastor, I say, well, the vision is we need to evangelize the community. And I go and I knock on 10 doors. I'm one person. I knock on 50 doors. I'm one person. But imagine if all of us were to knock on doors. And I'm using that as an example. I just don't know that door knocking is as effective as it used to be. But I'm using that as an example, because sometimes we need an imagery to understand the depth of what I'm saying. If I can knock on, like I said, 50 doors, if we empower the entire congregation, we could reach more people. Now, I said that because this is really where we're going with this particular text. Because when we start talking about numbers of people, we can't expect the church just to automatically look like it used to look like. Young people are not coming because their parents are not coming. Their parents are not coming because they don't want to deal with some of us who are stuck in our ways. When I was a youth pastor, I was already too old. I was 30 years old. I was too old to be a youth pastor. And I know that's hard for y'all to kind of, because back then, 30 years, at least I was kind of cool, kind of. No, kind of, serious. But let me tell you what, I say that because even then, I would dress similar to this. And my pastor would say, hey, man, sometimes you need to come in here in some jeans. But what he didn't understand is I was coming from work. I was bivocational. I'm not changing in the car. They're going to know who I am. Anyway, I can't come in talking about, what's up, y'all? They're going to know who I am anyway. I have to be authentically who I am. I say that to say, if we have a congregation that doesn't look like the community, we have to think about how then do we reach the community? And we can't reach them the way we've always reached them. The church is different. The church is different. I understand this. Not everybody's going to agree with what I'm saying about some of these things. But what I do know this is God has spoken to me. I've listened. I've seen for myself. And it's been confirmed in other pastors that are dealing with similar situations. Even Pastor Manaway came. His son serves as his young adult pastor. He's 30. Dynamic preacher. He says, Dad, I'm too old to be your youth pastor. Which is true. Now, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was a youth pastor at 30, it was common for most of us, because some of my peers were 30. So I wasn't like way too old, but I was old. I had to be very inventive. I had to think about things that were outside of the box. I had to reach out into the community, talk to other pastors who were doing things like I was trying to do. The point is, that was 30 years ago. We've got to have a different view for what God is saying. And it's tucked in this text. It's tucked in this text. He's saying to all of us, listen, church folk, there's some Gentiles that I need to reach, and I'm going to reach. And if I have to reach them first, I'll do that. This was over 2,000 years ago. Remember, this is Jesus teaching and through Paul and showing that If I gotta save them first, just so you get unstuck, I'll do that. If I gotta bless them because you got so set in your ways, I'll do that. I imagine being Israel. Oh, I'm chosen. But you should do this ministry. You should come to the temple. You should come to the synagogue. You should come to the tabernacle. I'm chosen. Because if you remember, they had to break through this, and some of us, they had to break through this notion of what it meant to be select ones. Because Jesus came teaching something they hadn't heard before. They had an understanding of what it meant to be chosen. And then here comes Jesus saying, but there's a new word. All right, I'll stick to the word because y'all getting quiet like I'm talking about y'all. Romans 11:25 says, I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, so that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godliness away from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them when I take away their sin. As far as the gospel is concerned, they are enemies for your sake. Say again? Oh, I didn't turn this light off. Thank you. Thank you. But as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs, the fathers. For God's gift and his call are irrevocable without repentance. They can't be taken away. Just as you were at one time disobedient to God, who have now received mercy as a result of their disobedience, so they too have now become disobedient in order that they too may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercy to you. Wow. For God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. And here's the doxology. On the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgment and his path beyond tracing out. Who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor? Who has ever given to God? That God should repay them. For from him and through him and for him are all things. In other words, who think they done God a favor? That's what this text is saying. Shoot, I went to church Monday. I went to church Tuesday. You done heard people say, I was at the church for this, I was at the church for that. As if we're doing God a favor. Pastors everywhere are dealing with, I know I've been dealing with it for some years, is how to combine events so that people aren't having to come to the church multiple times. Because people, it's almost like they clock in. I ain't coming on Wednesday and Sunday night. Pastor, you're going to have to pick which one you want us at.
Before you see us.
Yeah.
Every day you get mad.
Yeah.
You take it away.
Yeah, that was the old church though. I remember a time, Reverend Betts talking about, I remember a time when church was, I mean, you at church almost every day. Yeah. Pre-cell phone. Yeah. No, yeah, and this is where you had community. It was community. I'm not necessarily sure we need to go back to such a time, but it is something to having this idea and we may not say it, we may not even be intending to express it, but it almost is this notion that we're doing God a favor, or that we've done something that somebody else had didn't. Oh yeah, I was at church 3 days this week. I mean, shoot, I was there for Bible study. Then I went to choir rehearsal on Thursday. I had the meeting on Saturday. Then I had to come to the church Sunday morning. I was here at 8 o'clock. Okay. Okay. But beyond that, the question comes there is, what profit was it? And to whom did it profit? Let's say who can repay God? Who feel like we need, or who should God repay? I think the better question. Revelation 7:9. After this, I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. That's what it says, right? Yeah. They were wearing white robes, and they were holding palm branches in their hands. Can you see it? That's why we know it'll be a large number, because before the throne there was a vast multitude no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language. A large number. Not just folks in suits, but maybe folks in, I'm gonna go out on a limb, Hajib, what's it called? Hajib, and yarmulkes, and we just don't know. We just don't know. I got that. Before the throne of heaven, there will be a vast multitude. No one can count. From every nation, tribe, people, and language. Before the throne in heaven, there will be a vast multitude. No one can count. From every nation, tribe, people, and language. One more time. Before the throne in heaven, there will be a vast multitude, no one can count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language. So, we just read this, we'll read again. For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. Now, it's something that's important to understand here. Bishop Carlton Pearson, before he passed, some years before he passed, said that God told him that, y'all remember this? That everybody's gonna go to heaven. And a lot of his friends, which I had a problem with, cut him off. People who had been his friends for probably 30 plus years, severed ties with him, because they did not want to be associated with his newfound theology. I didn't agree with his theology necessarily, but I thought it was bad that his so-called friends cut him off. I won't even tell you who some of those so-called friends were. All you have to do is follow the media to know what was said about him. But the point is, this text says that God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. They're Without repentance, some texts will say. They can't be taken back. God's gifts and God's call is permanent. So if you've been called to a particular service, called even to ministry, a particular ministry, even if you are not walking in it, it doesn't mean that God took it away. It just means you aren't operating in it. However, I will say this, as it's suggested in our lesson, just like salvation, once you are saved, I do believe this theology, once you are saved, God says, Jesus says, no one can pluck you out of my hand. So I believe once you are saved, you are saved. I do believe you can fall from grace. I do believe you can resist the Spirit of God. I do believe that you can also resist the call on your life. Some people say I ran from the call. Yeah. You can resist. But what you can't do, I'm a firm believer, you cannot outrun God. I mean, you just cannot outrun God. You can try. You can try, but you are not going to outrun God. In fact, again, just like your salvation, just like your call, just like God's call on your life, just like the gifts of God, you can reject those calls, those gifts, and that salvation. Because otherwise, every church across this nation would be full of people because they say. But you can reject salvation. What are your thoughts? I kind of want to throw that out there to see what's your thoughts. Anybody? No thoughts. You won't have peace. Okay. Yeah. So Reverend Dale said you won't have peace. Something just won't be right. You know, I believe that and I agree with that. I have another thought though. I want to hear what else everybody else has to say. Anybody? You can resist or reject the gifts, the call, even the salvation of God. All right. How can you reject it?
Yeah.
Come on. It's like this. If I get ready to take this $300 and I say, Reverend Yvette, use this to buy yourself something nice. She has a choice. She has a choice. She don't have to take it. So think about this. You asked a question, but think about this, because it kind of ties back to what my thoughts were about what Reverend Dale said. There are many people who are still unsaved. And perhaps have had opportunities. You could probably think about family members. All of us could probably think about at least one family member who may have been raised in the church, but left the church and don't want to have nothing to do with church. They didn't get saved. They just was brought to church. They never got saved though. So here's kind of going where your question as well as Reverend Dale's question. So consequently, there are people who never get saved. And I'm gonna circle this wagon and come back to that in a moment. But Reverend McDowell said that they be uncomfortable, just something ain't right. But here's the problem. You can fall into discomfort. And before long, discomfort becomes your norm. And when you say something don't seem right, there are people living every day who don't know purpose, who chase after this and chase after that, all because they don't know purpose. Much the same, there are people who have calls on their life that never accept it, and they get to running and chasing this and chasing that because what they're trying to do is fill a void. But it becomes a way of life. It becomes who they are. Let me give you an example. I played baseball. I was pretty good. Serious, no joke, pretty good. When I met Reverend Yvette, she knew I wanted to try to play professional baseball. In fact, when I first met her, I never forget, I think we had gotten engaged at this point. There was a coach in Florida. His team told him, "You ought to try out for the Marlins." He was like, "I'm too old. I'm 30 years old." Remember this? 30 years old. So he said, "I'm not doing it. I'm too old." They said, "Tell you what, if we win the state championship, you got to try out." Fast forward, they won. He tried out. He actually made the team, the Florida Marlins. I said, "Baby, I can still do it." But before I met her, though, when I first moved to Atlanta, I spent a lot of time trying to find little teams that I could pick up and go play, and maybe somebody would see me, and maybe I even get a look by the Braves. That was what I was hoping I would do. No, serious. This is a true story. So I say that to say there are people similar to me, because I was now 30 years old. By the time I made 30, I had been trying for about 6-7 years. So at first I wasn't as old, but then when I got 30, I was like, I'm done. But the point I make is there are people like me who spend a lifetime saying, I'm gonna get one more shot. I'm gonna chase this dream. I was meant to play baseball. I was meant to play for the Braves. And they chase it and they chase it and they chase it. And before long, they chase it so long, they done got too old, they done got too tired, and they're not even marketable anymore. But they spent all of their life chasing something that wasn't theirs. So you can have a call on your life over here, but you can chase something over here. That the call is still there, but it's in the rear view mirror because you're chasing this other thing. I don't even have to ask you in the room to raise a hand. We all know somebody that can chase something. And I ain't talking about a man or a woman. It could be that, but it don't have to be that. It could be your job. It could be a goal. It could be an education. It could be a dream. It could be a hope. It could be a wish. It happens. But the gifts and the call, they're still there. That's why you have somebody, I'll use him as an example. Just on Monday, Pastor Harry Moore said, I accepted a call of ministry at 40 years old. 45, I think he might have said. 45 years old. He was pastoring at 46. That is old. But he had a call on his life.
Then you find out, okay, you realize that, oh my goodness, the Lord is calling me so hard and I'm acting, and doing my own thing.
Yeah.
So
sometimes it does take tragedy, not all the time. Sometimes it does take tragedy. The elder said, because we have to be on our back before we can look up.
yeah.
But we don't all have to fall before we look to God. But that is a common thing. Yes. Yeah. 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 I mean, I really believe that. I think the preach word, prayers, all of those things matter. The challenge is if we're not careful, we will fall into what this text has been saying. These particular texts, passages of text have been saying. And that's the fact that we believe because we are Israel, we don't have to do the things that God is calling us to do. So those prayers don't penetrate. Casey, when I give you an example, you hear a good sermon or somebody sings a song and they'll say, "Oh, Sister Jimenez, you should have been at church on Sunday. There was a word for you." God is so perfect in his design that who was supposed to be at church when that particular word came forward was already there. God don't be messing up on stuff like that. If he wants you to get that word, you're going to be there. But what happens is people, because we are Israel, that wasn't for me, that was for John. Because we Israel. I don't need that word to convict me. I don't need that word to challenge my life. I'm already elect. Again, I don't have to ask you to raise your hand. You know some folk like that in church.
Is because sometimes the person is scared of the calling and for what they may have to give up and being concerned with other people may think.
All of that. All of that. And in fact, I thought it was going to be about fear. I was going to say yes, but more. But all of that. It's when, first of all, it's like this. I don't have no money, but I was going it's like this. It's like, hold on. It's like when I forgot what they call it. I think they call it a gangster role. When I was coming up, now I showed y'all what it was, but if I had done this money like this and put this 5 on the outside, y'all don't know what I'm talking about, do you? I know Lakeisha do, you know what I'm talking about. You put that 5, you put that 20 on the outside, they call it a gangster roll. And be like, look, it's a lot more appealing, right? Now it looks like she got more than she actually had. I say that to say this. We don't necessarily make church appealing to folk. We don't. When you talk about what folk gonna say about me, what folk gonna think about me, y'all remember the movie Amistad? Do you remember what they call the Christians, the prisoners called the Christians? You remember? They called them, I'll help you, the miserable people. They called the Christians the miserable people. Now the prisoners called the Christians who were on the outside of the prison the miserable people. Why? Because when they saw the Christians, they looked like this. And they didn't want to have anything to do with it. And as much as we can think more of ourselves, we don't make this appealing to folks in the street. We look a certain way, we act a certain way, we talk a certain way, and we judge them. I might be preaching to the choir in here, but the fact of the matter is churches everywhere. I dealt with it on Monday. I had a conversation with a young pastor today, but I dealt with it on Monday talking to another pastor who completely did not hear the conversation that we were having. I was the old guy in the group, but this young pastor and I was having a conversation. He and 2 other young pastors. I was having a conversation with them, and the older pastor came into the room, and I was like, he don't get it. You're part of the problem. This is why these guys are struggling. And the church is much the same. We wonder why it is that young folk don't want to come. We wonder why young adults don't want to come. You got folk right now today, 35, 45 years old, somewhere in that window, saying, man, I don't want to deal with that. We have got, if we could get church, the notion of church out of our minds and do what Jesus has called us to do, we wouldn't have room for people in here. I'm telling you, if we would just love people, treat our neighbors how we want to be treated, golden rule, we would be bursting at the seams. If we would go, ye therefore, I'm just talking about Bible stuff now. If y'all want to talk about Bible stuff, I can talk about something else. But if we would just do what the Bible says, oh my God. We wouldn't have room to hold people because people are compelled when we do what Jesus told us to do. I got a note today, very encouraging note today, from the CEO of Penn Medicine. I didn't even know it. Wrote a note. I was inspired by your words. Just wanted to say thank you. Like, wow. The point I make though is you never know the impact if you would just live right. All right. The gifts are without, cannot be recalled. That's what it says. The gifts and calling of God cannot be withdrawn. The gifts and calling of God cannot be withdrawn. The gifts and calling of God cannot be withdrawn. But remember, you might want to make yourself a note. They can be resisted and they can be rejected. Oh, they can't be withdrawn. But you can definitely tell, that's all right. You can, God, you can keep that. I was watching, what's the movie watching? The Resident. We've been watching The Resident, binging on The Resident. And Malcolm Jamal Warner plays this excellent doctor. And he's one of the best in the country. Well, yesterday he met his dad for the first time. And he says all his life, he's been an overachiever. He said it became almost like a drug to him. And when other kids were chasing baseballs, he was chasing accolades. All because he said, watch this. Now, this is where he went from being doctor to being the little boy. This is what he said. Because I was hoping one day that my mama and daddy would come and say, come on, baby. Because he felt like he was not worth it. Where am I going with that? The fact of the matter is, what's that? Oh, they gave him up for adoption. Yes, they gave him up for adoption. When he was a little. Now, not only did they give him up for adoption, they went on to be married and had 3 more kids and kept all 3, except him. So it was painful. I said that to say that many times people reject what we have because it's been painful. So in this particular situation, we know that in our communities, and I say our communities, not just Black communities, but all communities, in our communities, there are people who are in the church who don't, I said earlier, we don't make it appealing. But think about it this way, in a very natural sense. Your father, your mother, whomever it is, but your father is a deacon or a pastor even of the church. And your pastor, or your father rather, your father abuses your mother. And nothing's ever done. And everybody thinks he's this great person. Well, the child will somehow internalize that and won't have anything to do with God because that's a representation of who God is. Now, that's an example, right? That's a real example that many of us can relate to. That who that person is in your life that represents God doesn't do a good job. And consequently, we ourselves reject that same God. That's really what happens with a lot of people. And it's happening today more than ever. Well, look at our government even. Many of us grew up, I look around the room, I think I can say probably safely, almost all of us grew up in a time when government officials were highly regarded. I mean, highly regarded. Matter of fact, so much so that when somebody said, you know what, Claude Edney, you could be president, you're like, not me. You know what I'm saying? But now, if I say Claude, I got to be careful. I can't tell Claude Edney he can be president. That joker go out there and have a, look, Pastor, you right. Look, all these people said that I could be the president. Next thing I know, his name on the ballot. You got to be careful today. It's a different day. You're not interested, are you? I can help you. No, seriously though, think about it. There was who was it that said they want to put on his ticket or something recently? Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers. Come on, man. The point is, we all laugh and we know how atrocious that is. But think about it this way. Bring it home. There was a time, and all of us again grew up in a very similar era. You never would disrespect the pastor. You wouldn't even think about it. Now, you might go home and talk to your mom and your boo about it, but you ain't gonna talk to nobody. You definitely ain't gonna confront the pastor with no disrespect. I remember, some of y'all know this too. That's a call in. Man, look at that, look at this. And then pastor come up. Hey, Rev. Hey, Rev. I'm coming to church Sunday, Rev. I'm gonna be in there, Rev. Yeah, right. No, for real, pastor, I'm coming. Y'all know I'm right? I was doing a funeral one time. Jokers, I got a collar on. You want some, Pastor? Oh. Oh, let me get it something. No, I didn't. Sure, that's a true story. That's a true story. I even had one conversation with a young man who wanted me to drink with him. I said, man, listen, I'm a minister. He said, all the ministers I know drink. Those were separate conversations. They were real. You say, what happened? Some suggest as simple as this: sign of the time. I believe there was the proper word is an apostasy, a falling away. I think there was a falling away from the things of God. I believe in current day, I think even Trumpism impacted even the church. Again, I don't have a concept of what it is to disrespect the pastor. I don't. And I haven't been a pastor all my life. But I never would have considered disrespecting the pastor. In fact, even as a pastor, I find it that I will often give you an example. Pastor Herb Lux preached on Monday. I took his coat, his bag, because I was serving him. He was a preacher. There's a bishop out in California right now. His mother and his sister passed. I hosted their funeral. I sat in a choir stand, much like I did for Pastor Mays. Right? To this day, he's like, man,
the way you treated me. I was like, listen, that's what I'm here to do. Because that's kind of how I came up. I don't understand an idea when people will be the way they are, not just with the pastor, but among one another. I don't understand that. So I think there was an apostasy, of falling away from the things of God, but also, and it's multifaceted answer, to be honest. But what we also saw is generational diminishing of spirituality, right? So my kid having a kid. If I didn't make my kid go to church, he ain't gonna make his children go to church. He ain't gonna make his children go to church. It's that kind of thing that's happening as well. So it's multifaceted, just a whole lot of things. But I think that's one of the things, one of the many things that happened, where we had a generation who weren't forced to go to church like we were. And then consequently, because they weren't made to go to church, they didn't make their children go to church. And that's where we are. We're seeing a generation of young people who weren't, not only were they not forced to go, they weren't even encouraged to go. So. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, then you have those strongholds of families who just, who talked to us? Is it Pastor?
Where? What church?
It's American Baptist, not a church.
McJunkin?
How he was, I think it was him saying it, he was talking about when it was a small church.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when it was a small church, you had more say, more influence.
Yeah.
And as the church got bigger, those prominent families started to lose the influence that they had, because now there's more people with influence.
I had that follow-up conversation with a different pastor and said the very same thing. So yeah, that happens as well. Even my church back home, we had a family that was a dominant family. Now that family is no longer the dominant family. But that does exist too. But again, if you have a family that becomes a dominant family, then you come in as a new member and you feel less than, or you don't feel like you fit in, or you feel like you're not regarded, not going to ever be invited in. Before long, you say, you know what, y'all can have it. Go ahead, that's your church. So that happens as well. Reverend Averdale? Yeah. 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 And that's where we are. We have to be, I think the gospel is the same. I think our approach is different. Again, we have to make it appealing to people, especially people who have not been accustomed to the things of the church. You know, all of us grew up where church was something we did. In fact, there was a time when I met people, if I met them in Atlanta, I would ask the question, what church you go to? Even in Atlanta, city big as Atlanta, if they were black, what church you go to? Now, you say, hey, I think I know you. I don't know, dude. Maybe. But in Atlanta, a city with, I think it's 8 million people at the time or something like that. If somebody saw me, they say, hey, I think I know you. I'm the associate over here at Hopewell. That's where it is. Not anymore. It's a different day. You had your hand up, maybe? Okay. All right. Let's go. We're almost done. What truth about God in Psalm 86:5 assures us that God shows mercy on us all? 86:5. You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call on you. That's Psalm 86:5. God is forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call on him. God is forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call on him. Some suggest that this means that God abounds in, or his mercy is magnified by disobedience. I don't know if I like that per se, because it almost gives gives license for disobedience. Oh, so that God can be merciful. Oh, God is forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call on him. This is good. But we got to always hear this in the conditional text, in which it's saying, it says to all who call on him. And call on him is not, oh Lord. That is not what that means. Call on him means that you call him as Lord and Savior, believing that he is, that God raised him from the dead. That's what calling on him means. Because there are some folk who believe that you just call on him when you need him, putting God on a shelf. Take him down when you need him. Because as long as God is on the shelf, there's no accountability. You don't have to do anything. All right? Last one. How does James 1:17 express that we are in God's debt and we should be thankful? James 1:17 says, to every good and perfect gift is from, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. Every good and perfect gift is from above. Anybody know that the devil has some gifts? And it will cost you. The challenge is this. The devil will provide those things, and it may not happen in your lifetime. Unfortunately, it could curse our descendants. That's what's unfortunate. And we may not see it initially, because we're living on the blessing. All right. Every good and perfect gift comes from God. That's what that said. Brother Jimenez, go ahead.
What it says, kind of think back to what you said earlier. People are set in their ways, and they don't say something like, well, I wait for the spirit to hit while I'm doing change. They want to have what's called fun. But
yeah.
If you read the Bible from cover to cover, you'll find that the word fun is not in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, there was a people. I don't want to get too in depth in that, but even in the Bible days, there was a group of people who believed that you should enjoy life as much as possible. But going back to what Deaconess Atkins said earlier, part of why some people don't want to give their life to the Lord is fear, is what people will think of them. But it's also that as well. I don't want to give up having fun, because everybody in my life that's saved, they don't know how to have fun. And I know you said it ain't in the Bible, but there is something to, I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I mean, I still want to go and see Earth, Wind, and Fire. You know? And still know that I'm saved when I come back. I ain't never been, but I want to go to City Winery. Y'all ain't say nothing about that. But the point I make though is all of us, and if we're not, if in order to be disciples, we have to help people understand you can still live your life. Because whatever you cut out of your life, that's between you and God. I believe the closer you get to the Lord, there'll be some things that are unhealthy. That's the word I really like to use in talking about counseling. But those things that are unhealthy, you do need to get rid of. But that again is between you and God.
Amen.
And those things will shed as you draw closer to God. Whatever those things are that are not of God, you'll start to dislike them too.
Amen.
I am convinced of this. You can't tell me you love Jesus and you don't like people. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me you love the Lord and you treat your neighbor badly. You can't tell me you love the Lord. You can tell me you go to church. I believe that. You can even tell me you love the church. I'll believe that. But you can't tell me you love God. You can't tell me that. Because you can't say you love God. I'm in the word, by the way. You can't say you love God and hate your brother. How can you love God who you have not seen and hate your brother who you've seen? It's in the book. So I say that not just because I understand that text. I say that because you cannot say you love God and then act hateful. No, you're not going to convince me you love God. You might convince me you love the church. And I'm talking about the building, not the church, the people. It is impossible. Because loving God changes your heart, changes your spirit, changes your countenance, changes your behavior, changes all of your actions. You cannot say you love God and your life does not change. Impossible. Unless your God is not the same one I serve. Let me say this real quick. So remember, God always has a believing remnant. Israel's rejection of the gospel is temporary. Israel will be restored. So I used to teach singles. I used to be a singles pastor as well. And I used to tell singles this. A man, and I wasn't trying to put men on blast, but a man will say, I love you. I didn't write this, I read it. A man will say, I love you to have sex. Watch this. A woman will have sex to say, I love you. Did you catch that? A man will have sex will say, I love you to have sex. And a woman will have sex to say, I love you. Y'all got what I said, right? So as I began to teach this later, as I matured, I began to understand. When that man says, I love you, many times he has even convinced himself. I believe there are people in church who have convinced themselves that the church building, the church people, and their relationship with God are synonymous. I believe that they have convinced themselves that they have a loving relationship with Jesus when they have yet to be introduced to him. I believe they have yet to come to a loving relationship with Jesus Christ. When I tell y'all Sunday after Sunday, every head bowed, every eye closed, I am praying, Lord, let some sinner raise their hand right now. And I ain't talking about somebody visiting. It's the truth, though. It is the truth. And I only understand that, I only know that now because I have met too many people. Listen, and I'm going to take y'all away from First African. I've met a lot of pastors who you have to question. I can't question a call on their life, but I can question the sanctification in their life. I told y'all, I think I shared with y'all, I'm having a current struggle currently struggling. Because I have a lot of people who want a fellowship, but the way in which they fellowship, I don't. So that keeps me on the periphery. Good people, so it seems. I don't know what they talk about in them little circles. Maybe not.
Create that a long time. And you want to work for the rest of your life.
You talking about better pastors, though.
I'm talking about pastors.
I know I'm ready to.
All I'm saying is, if we could, let me tell y'all one. Can I get 20 seconds? 20 seconds, not 30, just 20. Seminary. One of my professors said this: the goal of seminary is to tear down your fundamental beliefs. What they have not done a really good job of accomplishing is how to build it back up. I do believe this. This is my last 10 seconds. I do believe this. I believe the church, there needs to be somewhere that the Spirit of God comes through and tears down the fundamental beliefs of church. And then call people who can come in and help build the church back up to what the church is supposed to be. That's what I believe that needs to happen, is that we need to tear down some fundamental beliefs of what the church is and supposed to be. Because listen, I grew up the same way. The church was the building. We going to church. We gonna have church. Anybody tell me I was the church? Nobody told me I had to have a relationship with Jesus. I just had to know about it. I just had to know the stories. I had to know the Christmas story. I had to know the Easter story, and I was good. Come on now. I knew he was born in a manger. I knew the 3 wise men, that's what we taught, came from the east. They had gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I know the story. Born of a virgin. Come on, know the story. And then I came to Easter. What'd he do? He died. Buried in a borrowed grave. Hung him on an old rugged cross. Buried in a borrowed grave. Then he got up. I'm good. I'm a Christian.
In both of those instances, the narrative change. And I'm saying to you that as a member of the congregation, we no longer call Easter Easter.
Yeah.
It's Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah.
And my point is, I mean, we're still at Christmas, but it's Christmas time. And so I'm saying to you is that our quest to get new members, this is the membership fee, right?
That website.
Yeah.
All that.
Yeah. Agreed.
This is it. Funerals, this is it. Okay, all throughout our life, I'm talking about the technology has disturbed that of what we knew as being a culture in person.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So in order to support those people, I'm saying to bring them in.
We have to have that technology in place.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
So I'm calling spades, and I'm saying, if it doesn't work, you have a significant amount of people say, I ain't going back there. It didn't work.
Yeah.
So what, either we got to be technologically sound in our presentation so that we can not just change minds, but influence minds wherein that we do this one at a time, and we'll see people coming in. Without this.
Yeah. 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 There's that.
I don't even think it on, but here recently, since we've gotten YouTube, perhaps more profound than it was before. And I've heard people that call in and say they have seen choir members talking to one another. They've seen, people having food with one another, you know. I'm saying it's the advancement of what it is now. Yes, it's, I'm saying it's a lot clearer now than it was.
Under sitting there with their face all trying to.
Well, y'all are speaking to the issues, Brother Jimenez, and we're gonna go.
I want to say it's called practical ecstasy. Practical ecstasy.
Technical exodus, ecstasy. Yeah. Yeah, there's that. I'll tell you, listen, I'm not opposed to technology. Y'all should know I'm a techie. I'm not opposed to technology, but I agree with you that we have to make sure, and you don't want, here's a challenge. You run the risk of becoming the professional church, right? Here's one solution. I've kind of said this to our AV ministry. At some juncture, you have to zoom in on the preacher.
Amen.
Because we don't need to see all that. I don't know that we can stop it. So so what happens is we have to figure out ways how to remedy it. Now, I'll tell you, I got a whole lot of thoughts about what that should look like. But it takes, again, it's not just the pastor. We have a tendency to put everything, and I'm saying we, because I'm talking about y'all. Okay. We have a tendency to put everything on the pastor. Pastor, how you gonna fix the choir doing X, Y, and Z? If the pastor fix it the way I want to fix it, everybody gonna be mad. If I do that, no, hold on. When I do that, but see, that's only part of the problem, though. You hear what I'm saying? Deacon Stork, that's only part of the problem. Because see, the other part of the problem is, what do you see when you're looking on the cameras? You see people with their face like this. You see people with their arms like this. So the problem ain't what you see necessarily, but it's what they're doing when you see them. So it's all of that.
Well, I'm the smile first, and while you're preaching, I will not be a fairland.
It's not about the smiles. It's not about the smiles at all. Listen, people read faces.
Yeah.
There are folks who don't do a whole lot of smiling, but you can tell when the Spirit of God is moving. It ain't a whole lot of folk that smiling and grinning all the time.
Yeah.
But you can tell when the Spirit of God is in the house.
And I'm very observant, and I'm really mindful Catholic. And yes, I feel it in certain birth Catholic. You sit, they sit just like this. Yeah. Even when somebody is praying and it hurts my heart, and you know, that is the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Oh, it's the Spirit. Yeah.
I'm not going to pray to the Lord.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Well, we're gonna move forward. We know we got time. We got a lot we got to do, a lot of work before us. But again, it takes all of us, not one of us. May the Spirit of God be with you. May His peace be with you. May His love surround you. May His Holy Spirit change, move, rearrange you. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you tonight. Good to see everybody. DJ, good to see you, man. Dr. Lisa. Y'all should, Reverend Kelvin, Reverend Lisa, y'all should bring DJ with y'all. He's in Tacoma. We'll talk about it.
Don't turn that off. Oh, you want to turn that off. But I'm saying